So I would just like to invite us all to land here together a couple days after the holidays. Just kind of that collective sigh, letting go of actually embracing. This morning in my meditation, I was playing with this idea of just taking in and loving my body, loving the sticky, itchy parts, loving
Mhm.
any tension that's there, just loving all of it, all of this experience that we're all having together in all the different ways that we're having it. And so just want to invite us all to play with play with love and to play with joy today, taking that in to all the experiences that all of us are having in our both within and perceptually without, but really it's all about everything that is within. So, taking in a collective breath of love and joy together. Letting that just kind of wash over us. Lots of love, lots of joy with every breath we breathe in, and allowing it to transform us from the inside out. Let's play.
Play. Well, this is our fourth and last primary week talking about religion. And we have a couple of topics to discuss today. So, for the first 2 weeks, we discussed our experiences personally. Last week, we talked about internalizing that a little bit more. And we are going to talk some more about internalizing that today. So, the first thing I'd like to talk about today is when we talked previously, we talked about feelings of shame, feelings of guilt being affiliated with religion, even rightness and wrongness about how you were and how others were viewing you. So the first topic we're going to discuss today is how that manifests in the human animal and how that trauma, because I'm going to call it trauma because it was traumatic for me, how that impacts your today life, if there is any at all, or even if you're over it today, but it impacted you previously, and how maybe you look at things cynically or with less trust or things like that. So, who wants to go first this time?
I actually would love to because so while I was getting dressed this morning, I've been listening to another Lewis Howes um, podcast, and this one was with Rhonda Byrne, the creator of The Secret. And as I was listening, so Lewis has shared about him growing up in the religion. I think it's Christian Science, but I can't remember specifically. I found it really interesting because his view on Christian Science is like it was really helpful. He was talking about how his parents would turn off the television when there were drug commercials on and things like that because they very much believed that you can heal with the body. It was created by a woman, I guess, in the 1800s. And I know a few people that have um, also, I think it's the same religion that have been involved in Christian Science, and their focus has been on um, how, like, whenever it's made the news around here, it's been over parents that have refused to give their children drugs, and then people getting all up in arms about, why wouldn't they give their children life saving drugs? Um, And then my own this morning contemplation of sitting with, so I was looking at my daughter's core wound in her gene keys, which is the fifth key and it's all about timelessness. It's about a shadow of impatience, a gift of patience, and a siddhi of timelessness. And so, as I was pondering that this morning, I was pondering something that I very much know to be true right now, which is there is no such thing as death. So, interesting, just kind of exploring all of our different mindsets and the suffering that comes about when we believe, um, when our beliefs basically are creating that suffering. Our beliefs are creating this belief of shame, that we're not worthy, that we're not good enough. When the beliefs are creating feelings of guilt, we're not doing it right, we are sinners, or we are damned to hell. Um, and all of that is stuff that is going on within the mind, within the ego consciousness. And so, um, like this morning, I was playing with this concept, which I've been doing for some time now, especially with my mom's passing back in October. I feel her. I feel her love, and I see all of these gifts that she left me, this knowledge, this wisdom. And in those moments, I feel as close to godliness, both as myself and like all around me. And as I was pondering my daughter this morning, I was just thinking about loving me through her, loving her through her experience, just this unconditional love and this knowing of the perfection that she is and all that she is playing with and creating right now in her reality, and all of that is going on within her mind. So I just I don't know, I guess I'm deep in contemplation this morning. I love that you brought up exploring more of the inner dimension, because I'm also thinking about how I explore all of this within myself and then bringing that outside of myself. Like I just keep taking everything within and realizing there is no death. This is all this mindset work, or this like our perception of what is real, and um, and how we bring that back out into the world to share with other people. So I will stop talking now. That was like
That's all right.
All the
That's
all
what we're
this,
here
dimensions
for.
of Tanya's brain.
and that's just an appetizer.
hmm We know.
Oh yes, I know.
Okay.
Chrissy,
And
you
then
want
I
to go?
feel
Christy.
like every time I hear Tanya talk, and I'm like, and then I feel like the mortal. Like I'm like the opposite thinker. um, I don't even really remember what the question or like the lead in. I know the manifestation of it, right? I know as an adult in the last 5 years, I have been more aware of how traumatic or how traumatized I have been about right and wrongness and shame and guilt, and how it is like paralyzing to my body. And I'd always internalized that as like guidance, right? So, like, if your body was triggered in some capacity, that was like insight that it was the wrong thing to do, right? Like that inner conscience. And what I'm later now realizing was that it wasn't ever my intuition and my conscience, it was my conditioning. And so now I feel like I'm like going through this like unlayering of conditioning to just even start to notice what does my intuition feel like? And like I just shared something the other day with Aaron. I've got a whole traumatic, well, it's not really traumatic, my own traumatic experience from our Christmas morning, which I think also is a conditioning from our religion, my religion. And our Christmas morning this year was super slow. My children are teenagers. They wanted to sleep till noon. My husband's a night shifter. He wanted to sleep till noon. I was up at like 6:30, like ready. And so I had like pushed everything off till 10, thinking like this is the perfect compromise. Knowing good, like good and well that my people didn't want to get up till noon. And there was a voice in me that was like, just go to the gym. Just go do something for you. And I was like, well, that's not Christmas morning. Like I totally ignored that little voice. And then I forced my family to get up, and then they all were angry at me. And like in retrospect, I was like, oh, that was just my gut saying, like, take this time for yourself. Like, let's not force. It doesn't have to be like this, like, social media worthy Christmas morning celebration. Like it could be your own. Um, Yeah, but I had been like basically conditioned that it was just like a really like traditional experience and like celebrated day. And I'm forgetting that like I can ask myself or my children or my husband or whomever, like, how do we want to celebrate this year and like make it our own? So, yeah, to me, it's more like the conditioning versus the intuition, and like really starting to notice the difference between the two, which is not easy for me at all. I feel like this is a really big challenge for sure.
That's, I think, if I could interject, the initiation of the awareness is probably one of the hardest pieces as you start to open up that Pandora's box,
Mm.
that can of worms. It's like, what was that saying I've heard, and I can't remember who said it, but you can't put the toothpaste back inside the tube.
Oh, yes.
Like once you take the cap off that toothpaste and
Yeah.
you start having the awareness, then like a little awareness begets more, begets more, begets
Mhm.
more. And then it actually, I think, I don't know that I would say it ever gets easy, but that awareness of the difference between the conditioning and then
Mhm.
the intuition, once it starts to unfold, it's like you can't stop it.
Yeah. Yep. And it is a really interesting. I'm like, I have this picture that I was trying to send to you all with the fish. Did it ever come through
Mm-mm.
this? The fish in the fishbowl, and it was like religion and spirituality.
Mhm.
And like this really just really caught my attention because it's like you can't see it, right? When everything around you is the same, like it looks the same. And it's like it's not until you like run into the wall, you're like, oh, there's a wall there.
Mhm.
That's how I feel like I'm running into a lot of walls.
It can resonate until it doesn't anymore.
Hmm.
And that's when you start hitting the uncomfortable point of, okay, if this isn't resonating with me, then what?
Yeah.
Right? I think that might be where you're hitting the wall. And it's like, nope, this just isn't working for me anymore. And
Right.
what does?
And what's unusual is that the people that are around me, a lot of them are still resonating with that philosophy. And so when I notice like this doesn't feel right to me, I feel a little disconnected and separated. And so that it's like, I don't know, it just feels a little, it's real vulnerable. It's like the most vulnerable feeling to just be like, I don't want to do this anymore, you know?
I was reading this morning about God, or um, like spirituality coming in symbols. And I was thinking about tradition. I was thinking about Aaron being here during Thanksgiving and us completely redoing tradition. Religion to me feels very much like tradition and um, like structure around how we're supposed to do things
Mhm.
versus spirituality is like, what does it mean to us? How are we connected to each of us, and how are we connected to ourselves? Because like for Christmas, in the past we've celebrated Christmas, we didn't at all this year with our daughter coming home and like, yeah, we didn't have a tree, we didn't decorate, we didn't do any of those kinds of things. We just spent time together. So, Aaron, I'm really curious
Mhm.
about you being someplace. I know that you didn't celebrate Thanksgiving, but
Mhm.
like, do you guys usually celebrate Christmas and how's that?
It's
Like,
what came to mind when you said spirituality versus religion. It's like, to me, and these are my beliefs, right? It's like religion feels like should and spirituality feels like want, right? Or like the
I like
7
that.
days of the week is spirituality to me, and like one day of the week, Sunday, feels like religion to me. Um, but we've we've always decorated, and obviously we aren't church people, right? So it's never been that, but it's you know um presence and talking about Jesus and things of that sort. But what was really funny is so Grayson wrapped her presents this year. We just brought a couple of them with us, and she wrapped them, and she was wrapping them, and she was like, okay, so I'm gonna like number them, and then I'm gonna like choose the number, and then you tell me which one I get to open. And I said, or you can just decide what one you want to open. Just open it. And
Wanted
she,
to make a game out of it.
I know she totally wanted a game, but I think it's also like, this idea that like I can't open, and it was the 24th. And I said, if you want to open up all your presents right now, like open up your presents right now. Like you don't have to wait till tomorrow. Like do what you want to do. And she was like, I can't. I'm like, you totally like do what you want to do, right? Like you already know what you're getting. What do you want to do? So Jason had gone somewhere, I don't know. And I came out of my room, and she's like just opening them. And I'm like, how are your presents? She's like, they're great. It's just like, it's like a selfie stick, some pencils, like a little bit of not slime, but these like little plate, like it's not slime, but it's like these little tiny little bubble things. I don't know how to describe it, but just and just this really getting her away from even like her first Christmas. We didn't do anything. Like I think I bought her a wooden teething ring from like a local, store. I've never really done that. I've noticed my mom, like Grayson kind of made an Amazon list, and Grayson had all these high heels, all these like makeup, all this stuff. And my mom is like, intentionally did not buy her any of those things. The things that my mom felt comfortable with, my mom bought for Grayson, and it's just so fascinating to, even in the gifts that we want to give, right? It's like we want to give a gift, but it's from a place of, I feel like sometimes it's from us wanting to give that gift, or the gift that we want. Like my mom kept asking her, like, where's your books on your Christmas list? And Grayson's like, I don't want books. Like I want this, and just this idea that it has to look a certain way. So we were out playing and boogie boarding Christmas Day, and there were, I guess they call them devil rays here. They're smaller. They're not the manta rays, but they're the tinier ones. And they were just bouncing out of the water and going through the waves. And you could just see them. And and she was like, this is one of the best presents ever. And that has always been, to me, has always been more important, is the experiences. I've told her, even with birthdays, I'm like, we can always remember every place we've ever taken you and the things we've done together. But if you were to say, Mom, what did you get me for my second birthday or my second Christmas? Like, I don't know. And so really infusing, it's kind of like Valentine's Day to me, or birthday. Like we don't need Christmas to give a gift. If you want to give a gift, you can give a gift whenever you want to. And I think in the Western culture, such a consumption society, it's like, what am I getting versus like, how can we, it's not all about giving, right? It's a giving and receiving, but how can it be more about than just gifts? My take a couple of times ago is just like, how are we every single day of the week, not just like, it's Christmas, let's all dress up, that kind of brings back, if you talk about not trauma, but like, I know my mom would always like make us brush our teeth before we open presents, and we'd have to get out of our jammies. And, it's just like these things that made her feel, I don't know. I don't know if I've asked her specifically, but like the good mom, like we have this facade, right? And I've never had Grayson do that. It's like, you want to stay in your jammies all day? Fine. You don't want to brush your teeth? I don't care. So just breaking down those norms, kind of like what you were talking about, Christy, of like, it might have been, but how do I want to, have Christmas with my family? Or, and aren't we just, for me, it's like, aren't we just celebrating spirituality and God within us and all of the things all of the time? Not just like, it's Christmas, let's go to church. Jason's family is Catholic. He's not really practicing anything, but they always go to church on, I guess it's Mass. Do you go to Mass the 24th or something? It's that, but you don't go to church any other time. It's just very interesting.
I remember very much my grandmother was about, we need to go to Mass on Christmas Eve, or I don't remember, maybe it was like Christmas Day as well, that evening or something, like midnight Mass. And I don't remember any of those beyond the time that I spent with her. And it was interesting. I asked Dominique I think it was the day before Christmas, we were talking about my mom, and I asked her what it was about, like, what were her favorite things about Nana? And she said it was the time that we spent together, and how, like, we could just go to Safeway and get ingredients to make cookies. And Nana was always open for trying anything new. And just, I always felt like I could just be myself around her. And I found that super interesting because I realized that I kind of had some of that experience with my grandmother when I was young, but there was still so much of that undertone that was there about, oh, well, we're sinners, so we need to go to church. We need to ask for absolution. We need to ask for forgiveness. But yet we never forgive ourselves. Brenda, I want to invite you into the space. I know you don't need an invitation, but
I'm here. I, as we've discussed previously, have a lot of different experience than most of you. And I just spent some time observing recently how it has impacted me internally and in my behaviors and actions today. And just I really resonated with what Erin was saying, because the word she didn't say, but I kept hearing, and what she said was obligation. Right? We have an obligation to buy presents. We have an obligation to buy the presents that they want, but that fit our model. We have an obligation to wait until 10 o'clock, noon, whatever, or at least Christmas Day. And just, I've noticed for myself this year, I'll be honest and say, yeah, we still pay attention to the commercial aspect of it, but it's like the obligation of having to find something for everybody. That always has bothered me, because it's like, and I don't understand, if I find something in March, why can't I give it to you in March? Why do I have to wait for either your birthday or Christmas? Right. And then there's an obligation. But if I do that, then I have to come up with something else for those days. So it's like, the kind of thing. We had nothing opened here on Christmas Day. Everything was opened when it showed up. we have to order everything, right? So my daughter brought my husband's gift with her on the plane because it was something that I couldn't get shipped here. So she brought it with her, and she got that before he left, which was for me, but she got it before he left. And then she sent me my present that arrived Christmas Eve. So I opened it when it showed up because I was so excited. You know, I knew what it was. And hers showed up. My daughter's gift, I think, showed up on the 20th. I think it showed up on Christmas Eve as well. And she's like, Mom, I have to go down with my cart to go get it because it was so big. And it's like, but it was practical and what she asked for. And I don't know how that all relates in, but I was just noticing the obligatory part has finally started to ease of what Christmas is supposed to look like. And I can expand on that and say, you know, what religion is supposed to look like based on the path that you or your family or your parents or generations have chosen for you. And when you take a step back and look at that obligation and whether or not that still works for you, and maybe it does, but if that doesn't still work for you, then what holes are left? Because they've been conditioned, right? And if you start pulling the pieces out, does that leave holes? And if so, how are you going to fill them? So I'm still going through a lot of that myself of, you know, if that's not what works for me, then what does? And I'm still playing with that personally. And I think we all are in a certain aspect.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say,
and it can change.
Yeah, like we get to redecide, right? Like I know sometimes my mom will be like, well, that's what we've always done, or that's how we used to do. It's like, okay, and I get to decide again how I want to do it. And it doesn't mean that the old way is wrong and the new way is right, correct, whatever, you know, it's just like, we just get to redecide, like, okay, I'm a new person, or I've evolved more, or whatever it might be. And I don't want to do it that way anymore, or I want to do it this way. And that's okay.
There's nothing that says that you can't do what they want to do and do what you want to do.
Right.
I mean,
there's just so much fluidity behind it, right? Like, it doesn't have to be this cut and dry, concrete way of thinking.
And I think that's the freeing part.
Yeah. I know we grew up going to church mass, like Sunday mass every Sunday, and then most certainly Christmas. And it would be like kicking and screaming. I mean, they would do like midnight mass for children. Like, who wants to go to midnight mass, right? All the kids want to do is go open their gifts, right? But now we have to go sit at mass. And we did this for a very long time with our children, and got to the point where it was like, who are we fooling? You know, like, are we fooling ourselves to think that we don't go to church all year long, but then we're going to dress up in these like beautiful dresses and matching outfits and just get our picture taken? And I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. And we actually didn't even go to church this year. But I will tell you, when we fed the homeless the Sunday before and like listened to this man tell his story, and like, I mean, my heart, I just like, it was like, I felt so alive. I was like, this is way better than church. Like, this was church, right? And because I don't know how my
human experience, right?
Yeah,
it was human experience, not just something preached at you.
And it was genuine. It was total genuine, which you all know I've kind of shared my journey with that. Like, the first time I went, I was noticing myself almost like feeling sorry. And then the next time it was like seeing them as souls, you know, and yeah, I don't know. It was beautiful. And I probably should talk to my husband and children and just kind of see their experience too, because I feel like we're making like a family unit decision, but I tend to lead in the unconditioning parts of it for sure.
You know, Christy, I'm kind of that way too. It's like, okay, I'm kind of the one, but what I've also realized is like, my family doesn't have to go, or my family doesn't have to do it if they don't want to. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
It's going back to like, okay, so if you want to open Christmas presents and I don't want to, and I want to go help feed the homeless, you guys can open presents. I can go feed the homeless. can
Yeah.
both be happy, and then we
And
can come back, you know?
that is a big thing for me. And I can say, oh man, I'm like, I don't know if I could do Christmas that way. That would be a big jump for me. I do know several years ago, I was eager to find a different type of church. I wasn't jiving with the church that I was at. And my husband was like digging his feet in. He's like, I'm not going to this other church. I'm like, fine, I'll just go by myself. And it did feel weird at first. But then it became something that I like to do for me. Um, then that evolved into not working either. So yeah,
But it totally can. I mean, that's the whole
of
thing.
course.
If it resonates with you and
Mhm.
that, you know, speaks to your soul and that is all good, we're not trying to sit here and bash anybody's beliefs at all,
Of
right? We're
course.
just exploring the concepts and making sure that, you know, people understand that it's not all scripted.
And
You
I
know,
think the biggest question, like what Aaron had said about spirituality being more of like what you want.
Mhm.
And I just think it's such the question, which you all know this is like the wall that I keep running into. Like I don't ever ask myself what I want. Right. So I lean into those obligatory traditions or,
It's easier.
expectations. Yeah. Well, and it's almost unconscious. It's like it's just what I do. It's just the habits, right? And so like getting into the habit of asking myself, like, does this work for me or not? Such a big question.
It is. And if the answer is no, it can become scary
Yeah.
because then what?
Yeah.
Which
Because
is,
there's a natural need to fill a void, right? If this isn't
Of course.
working, then what?
Of course.
yeah. And it's within that void where all the treasure
Mm,
is.
always.
It's in that void that holds all the different possibilities. And that's why we have each other.
Mhm.
I think religion, uh, so I believe that religion was created as this intent of helping us come together. But, and for some of us, it has certainly done that. I loved it. I love that you corrected Aaron the but from the and when I was doing my improv class in embodiment. We played with instead of using but and. So I believe that religion was created with the intention of bringing us together, and in in many cases it has done that, but in other cases it is also created this, like, when we get stuck in saying this way is the only way,
Mhm.
we lose our freedom. So that when we, if we can say this no longer resonates with me, this no longer feels good to me, this no longer feels like it is for me, for my connection, I can learn to be comfortable in that space of not knowing, in that space of I can let there be some stillness, maybe even in the midst of some chaos where I'm like, nope, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. And I still haven't found, I'm not able to pull down that in which does, and I can be okay and allow the space, allow things to just settle. That is
Agreed.
a practice
Mhm.
that when we're moving from not having been aware or awake or realizing what I even want to having awareness, to being so in tune and in touch with what you want, that becomes so important, not because of its selfishness, like we like to get on people about selfishness, But our being selfish, our being so in tune with what we want, actually is the thing that helps everyone else
Mhm.
be that example.
I agree.
Right.
So we're going to switch up the topic. The next topic, I'll tell you where it comes from. And then if there's any thought about it, great. So we've talked about traditions as far as religion is concerned. And I want to take that step further and say there's traditions in mandates, right? There's mandates of the different churches that have their own, and all of them are different and some of them are the same, but they all have their own mandates. You should not, you shall not, all those kinds of things, right? But when technology and science evolve to a point that that's no longer necessary, but the church still refuses to change. And my thought behind that, so I was thinking about a neighbor of mine is Jewish, and I don't have a lot of familiarity with Judaism. And I asked him why they couldn't eat pork, because I didn't know. He just said, I can't have pork. I'm like, okay. And then I asked why. And he said it was started in the point where there wasn't refrigeration, obviously back in the Old Testament days, and it was unsanitary to have pork. And so my brain goes, but it's okay now. And so, but why hasn't the church or temple or whatever you call it, why hasn't it changed to keep up with technology? And I know when we first started, we talked about the fact that, you know, religion was bringing people together of the same beliefs, right? So, and to me, then my brain starts spinning and saying, but this is about control then. It's not about, because I understand maybe back then there was the practical reason, and because of the practical reason, it was a shall not, or you can't. And maybe that made medical sense at that point in time. But now we have refrigeration, we have inspections, we have all kinds of things that make it safe, if you will. But the church doesn't change their position on those kinds of things. And I'm not picking on that one specifically, it just happens to be a recent experience of mine that kind of brought the point up. And anyway, I think my note was, I think it's a threat. And to keep the control, to not keep that control is a threat. And that's my soapbox for that one.
And why do we feel the need to have control?
Because chaos doesn't feel good.
Because chaos is uncertain. And what is uncertainty?
Death.
Mm-hmm. It's that thing that we're afraid of, but there is really no death. There's really no such thing.
Right.
If death actually existed, I would have no memory of my mother or my grandmother or my Uncle Stanley or my dad or anyone I've ever lost, air quotes, lost, right? If death truly existed, all of that would be gone.
And a lot of the religious threat to the members is what's going to happen to you after you die if you don't comply.
Yeah.
Right.
Perceived safety.
Perceived safety of this life, your next life, your afterlife, whatever you want to look at it. And so in order to keep you under control, they make rules. Even if the rules, you know, with science and technology are no longer valid. I'm not saying everybody does. I just was bringing that up as a interesting point.
The curious thought that brings me to is just like the work that we all do with ourselves is noticing or recognizing those parts of us that have behaved a certain way or been conditioned a certain way, and how we oftentimes fall back into those spaces. And then we sort of personally admonish ourselves, like when we maybe drink when we say, I no longer am going to be a drinker, or when we spend money to feel better rather than, for some other purpose that we've chosen. The work that we do on ourselves is, instead of admonishing that part of us that has slipped from grace, learning to love it, to embrace it, and to say, thank you for keeping me safe. I appreciate the intention of wanting to keep me safe.
Mm.
If that is the work that religion, the doctrine of any kind of religion, if instead of viewing it like, if part of our work as a collective is, instead of seeing each other's religion as this thing that we either admonish or just accept, it is what it is, if we just started to love it and embrace it for what its initial intention was, which is to keep us safe in the now life as well as the afterlife. Like, right? Just, I don't know if I'm explaining this in a way that is making mortal sense, but
Hmm.
this idea that, like, how we treat ourselves is maybe how we need to treat religion.
Mhm.
And even I'm like, I want to interject that because, compassion has not always been my work. That has been a learned practice in the last couple of years. Thank you to Erin for that introduction. And for you all as well to hold space for me. But to think about, when Tanya, you always say, like, any judgment is self-judgment, right? And like, that was the air that I breathed. My entire life was critical thinking, judgment, guilt, shame. Like, that was it. And so for me to have to shift or choose to shift into compassion felt really weird. It feels so much better now. But to think about, like, to look at other people with compassion and curiosity and not judgment, it's like sometimes very effortful for me.
Mhm,
But I think it feels good, right?
mhm,
Like, that judgment feels like garbage in my body. And I love when, like, Abraham always talks about, like, the conflict of, like, your inner being and then the thoughts, and like when you feel that, like, angst or whatever, it's just the difference. And like when you can get into peace and love and grace and compassion, like, it just feels like warm and soft and like nourishing to your body.
mhm,
And just to be like the example of someone who didn't have that growing up, right? Like, that wasn't well practiced around me at all. So learning compassion for me at first was like, that felt wrong.
mhm.
It was such like a mind trick for real because I was like, no, it should feel like crap all the time. It's like, actually, no, like,
Because that was your baseline, right? That was
right.
your that
Like
what
someone
is,
who's sick all
it's
the time
that
and
it
then they're
felt.
well, they don't even know that they're sick because they're just like conditioned to be sick,
Yes.
you know? Yeah.
And you had so much evidence. This was this way for me too. It's like you had so much, I'm assuming, tell me if I'm off base, but you had so much evidence of how being mean to yourself actually got you to where you
Was
are.
productive, very productive. And then I got praised for the productivity of being an asshole to myself. Right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
This is the paradigm that we are taking a proverbial, I was going to say hammer to, but really it's more like the alchemical transformation
Soft
to.
breaking open is what I
Yeah.
imagine. It's like a
Yeah.
lovingly breaking open.
Like I lately the picture of the dung beetle and how it lays its eggs keeps coming to mind. Like, the dung beetle lays its eggs in this hard pile of poop. And then when it's time for them to hatch, it rolls it into the water to allow it to just soften so that they can hatch and be born. And I think that's
Hilarious.
just like everything, right? It's
Poop balls.
totally having the compassion for ourselves. And it's always this, I see it sort of as this game or this interchange that's not only happening within us personally, but then our perception and how it gets played out into the world. So, my focus has been internal for a very long time. I kept shrinking all of humanity down into community and society, down into my very closest relationships, down to the tales of guilt and shame and wrongness within my daughter, who is a part of me. She is an external representation of my most internal. And each time I've done that and found compassion there, like then that compassion starts to radiate outside of me. And so I was just suggesting that perhaps us exploring this concept of, instead of seeing, um, and not everybody does, but instead of seeing religion with any sort of disdain or judgment, that we just love it for the intention that it was originally created, which was to unite us, to bring us together, to keep us safe, right? But we all know, or we're in the process of learning and really integrating this idea that our safety is within. Our safety has always been within, and we've seen it as something outside of us. We've seen it as, like he has the power,
Right.
Allah has the power, Buddha, like whatever is somehow outside of us. But it's when we embrace and take that deep within us to the very core of our being, then that's the thing that we're starting to put out into the world, to give to the world.
Like, I have a thought, and this might be a whole tangential experience, but like, Tanya, your experience with trauma work, and like when I'm hearing you express this like love and appreciation, and like in this moment, I'm feeling like angry because I feel like a lot of my experience was traumatic.
Mhm.
And that part of me that's like, but you should be grateful, right? And I'm like, but I just want to be angry about it for a second, because for the longest time I wasn't ever given the opportunity to say, like, does this feel good to you? Is this something that you want to do? Right? It was just like, here is what you do because this, like, you're supposed to, right? And I think you have such a good presence or allowance and like guidance for people that like, I want to get over this anger, but I don't want to just put the lid on it anymore, right? Like, I don't want to just be like, okay, I'm going to be grateful and I'm going to be appreciative for my experience, because really, in my authenticity, I'm angry about it, right? I
Mhm.
feel, I don't know, I feel like just yeesh in my body, like it just feels hot right now.
Tell us more.
Well, and I'm like, I know that I don't even know that I have words. I just know that
How does
with
it feel in your body? You
my
said hot?
stomach feels tight, like a big knot,
Mhm.
and I feel like my throat is just getting tighter. Like I don't have words to say. Like there's a lot of shame coming into my body, feeling like I shouldn't feel this way. And yeah, just tightness like all through my midsection.
And why should you feel this way?
Because I do.
There's no way around anger. There's
Right.
only
And
through it.
Right. And that's the reason that I brought this up, because I feel like my experience in my upbringing has always been to dismiss a lot of the things that I was feeling and not really give that space to be heard, right? And so wanting to just like honor that genuinely and know that you do hold such good space for like that authentic emotion.
Hmm.
So it like felt really vulnerable to even just kind of bring that up.
And
But
I can
already it
say,
feels better. Like just already, just like saying those words, like I already just feel softening in my body.
I have a lot of anger for my experience too.
Mhm.
And I can feel compassion for the original intent.
Mhm.
I can. Where I struggle is they're continuing to deceive. And that's where I get mad, is because I feel like they're lying based on what I feel like I know now. And they shouldn't be allowed to do that to people. That's where my anger comes from. But I feel so much love for people who recognize that and are looking, may want to do something different but feel afraid to because of all that loss of connection and everything. But I can definitely, I can have the compassion for the original experience of wanting to keep people safe, to want to form a place of community and connection. And I totally can appreciate that. I really can. But like I said, the bigger emotion right now is an outpouring of love of anybody who might feel stuck, who's watching this and maybe gets a feeling of maybe something else is possible. I don't have to be stuck. And that's where my heart just, yes, I want to hug you. I just want to hug everybody for that opening, if they get that kind of opening in their hearts.
I think anger, if you're not used to it, can feel really powerful. And I think it can feel really scary, because that's one of the emotions. I was just telling my parents this the other night. It's like, it's totally okay to be happy, somewhat okay to be sad, right? But like anger, like you've even talked about it, Christy, right? Like just, what do you say? Stow your anger, or what did your
Oh yeah.
parents tell you,
Put
right?
down.
Like stuff it down. And that's not okay. And I think that there might be a fear with a lot of people of like, well, if I express it, I have so much anger, how long is this going to last?
Right.
But even just watching you, that's not all of it, right? That's not all the anger you have, but that came and it went.
Yeah.
If we allow it, but we're just so used to like you talk about all the time, like the grateful stick. I think sometimes people misconstrue positive thinking for like shoving the happiness over the
Right.
anger. It's like the anger's got to come up and out when you're feeling it, because then
And I think being in a safe space, like I knew that I was not going to be met with like shame, right? Like I felt very comfortable to share that because I knew that it was just going to be allowed. Right. It was like, maybe that was me following my intuition, because I feel a little like off the rail right now with my brain. Like I think I just had like an out of body experience. But yeah, just being an example of honoring that emotion and being compassionate and appreciative of it, right? Like I just feel like that was coming towards me, Tanya, when you're like, like let's love the intention behind it. And I was like, but I'm angry about it.
Hmm.
And I couldn't have genuinely like held that space of compassion and love and be angry. It would have been like some resentment that was going to come afterwards.
Within the heart, we can hold that duality of emotion. We can have that anger come up and we can just allow it to be supported by love.
Mm.
Like, it's
Mhm.
okay that I'm angry right now. I'm so fucking angry right
Mhm.
now. And I can just love that I have the space to express that
Yeah.
and know that it's not going to last forever. Erin's so right about how when that blossoming of anger starts to open up, like this is us having gone in trauma, gone all the way through fight, flee, freeze. And as we're thawing out, as we're coming out the other direction, as we unthaw, as we want to, oh gosh, I just want to push this away. This is so uncomfortable. And we come into the anger, that is where we are starting to regain our power. Going into trauma, going into any sort of like smalling of who we are, that anger is that first point of power, right? And so as we're getting it back, it can feel huge, it can feel uncontrollable, it can feel like being on the end of a fire hose that has been opened up completely, and we're experiencing all of that. um and so it can feel scary, like it's never going to end. And so we just sort of have to allow ourselves those moments to dip into that anger and to be held
Mhm.
with love. And as that capacity grows, like right now, potentially you are exploring that at an individual basis, which
Right.
I know I have, I know Erin has, I know Brenda has. And Brenda, perhaps what you're experiencing right now is, as you have explored that and worked with that at an individual level, now you're looking at it from a collective, a larger point of view. Because I know that, like, I know you very well, and I know that you're growing your capacity for love, and you're
Mhm.
growing. We're all in the process of growing our capacity for love and grace and peace. I just see, Brenda, you're in this space where it's like looking at the collective and having that anger towards the collective of religion, like they shouldn't be able to do this, is the expanded version of that anger, instead
Mhm.
of seeing them as, of course they're still this way because there's so much fear. Like it's like the big frozen chunk, right?
Mhm.
There are chunks that have broken off that are thawing out faster, but
Yep.
the whole of humanity, or the whole of religion, has been this one big collective iceberg, right? That has just been frozen with fear.
Yep. And I think a bigger portion of my anger, I mean, there's individual anger, but the bigger portion of my anger is rage for the underdog. And I view people who are imprisoned by these things as the
Asleep.
underdogs, asleep
Yeah.
as the underdogs. And it's like, I want to right the world for the underdogs. And that's the frustration and anger, and you shouldn't be oppressing people, that kind of thing. So yeah, I
It's
think about it
it's
quite a bit.
it's the people that are still on the blue pill.
Hmm. Oh, absolutely.
We all need
This
to watch The
was
Matrix again.
no
We
doubt.
we just watched The Matrix um in the last few days, and then David, I guess, watched all three of the original, and then they just came out with a new one, and I was watching bits and pieces, and it was, of course, just the perfect bits and pieces that I wanted to hear, because I'm like, yeah, we're just fucking with consciousness on a new level, or playing with it, right? So yeah.
I need to go back and watch it.
This has been a delightful month of conversation for me,
Mm,
for sure.
agree.
Um, very, very grateful that we got the opportunity to discuss this somewhat sensitive topic to people, right? And showing that we can all be how we want to be, believe what we want to believe. And I encourage anybody watching this, challenge yourself and see if it's still working for you, whatever it is. If it doesn't feel right, challenge it and see what works for you.
Yeah.
And next month, our topic is going to be, do we know?
I think we talked, maybe brush on it, body. What do you think about body? Because everybody starts off with the new year with, you gotta do that. And not necessarily the losing weight, but just like body, bodily functions, all of the things. Moving our bodies.
Amen.
Loving our bodies.
Loving this body.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, then until then.
Okay. Until next time.
Thank you all
Yes.
for playing.
Oh, good.
Good.